Well, hello there, folks. Here we are again. Here's another Sty story for you. This is a little unusual one. I talk about some of the odd things that you run into when you're out in the wilderness, and lots of animal encounters. I've had a lot of different animal encounters. I'll probably do some Sty stories on those animal encounters. I did the one on the caroling coyotes. I'll do some more. But I think when it comes to encounters like that out in the wilderness, probably the oddest one and the strangest one Sty's ever encountered was, well, first I'll tell you, when it came to the backcountry, I had this wandering spirit. I mean, I was notorious for saying, well, honey, you be okay with the kids for a few days? And she'd know right away, yep, he's going to pack up, he's heading up in the backcountry. And I would do that quite often. I'd say, well, and it all depended on my mood. Sometimes it'd be a 1 day, a 3 day, or maybe it'll be a 6 day trip into the backcountry. So when I got a wild hair, off I would go off into the backcountry. I just loved getting out there so far that the last thing I'm going to run into are people. I just want to get out there and be in contact with nature. Just me and Mother Nature hanging out in the backcountry. So I decided this one day that, I'd like to go up. There's a mountain lake about 14 miles from our cabin. Quite a hike to get into it. It was probably about, 14 miles as the crow flies. I would say hiking in, it was probably closer to about 22 miles. Because you ended up having to take these switchback trails up this one mountain to get up to this high mountain meadow that was above the tree line. And in that meadow was this huge, what I considered huge, it probably covered about 80 acres, a big mountain lake, rather deep lake too. And that lake was full of native cutthroat trout, beautiful trout. Oh, good eating too. Cold water. Now, people would go up there on occasion. We had a couple of locals that ran pack strings, and they would take fishermen up there once in a great while on fishing excursions. We always knew, for the most part, when somebody was heading up that trail. It had kind of like a system at the trailhead. If somebody was going up the trail, if there was anybody on the trail, you would put a flag up, letting people know that there's someone on the trail. Because there were some spots, if you were going in with a pack team, if I took a horse in with a pack horse behind it, there were some spots on those switchback trails that if you came into a pack string coming down, there's no way to get around each other. So it's nice to know if there's somebody on that trail that'd be coming in or out. So when I decided I'm going to go up there, I'm going to spend 3 days. I put my gear together. I'm going to go up there and spend 3 days. And I figured, well, I don't have to take a lot of food with. I'm going to be catching plenty of cutthroat trout up there. I'll be eating trout for a couple of days. So I didn't have to take a lot of food with me. And I set off. And I got to the trailhead, and there were no flags up. And they had like 8 flags, so that up to 8 different groups of people going in could put a flag up. There were no flags up. All the flags were down. So I put a flag up and I headed up. And it's quite the hike. And on the way up, you come to a nice high country meadow that has a big beaver dam on it and big beaver pond. And that pond's full of trout too. And it's got an old turn-of-the-century cabin on that pond that nobody uses. In fact, the cabin's located on Forest Service property now. And just above that cabin a ways on the trail, you come across an old mining site. They did, back in the early 1900s, they did a lot of mining up in that area. And if there's an old mine there, nice mining drift that you can go hiking in. You can hike into it about a mile, mile and a half. And then they must have blasted it shut or something that far in because it just dead ends. That's a nice attraction if you've got the mind to go into a mine. That was a nice spot to go into. And then you hit the switchbacks going up the mountainside, and it was steep. And there's a creek, the creek that ran close to our cabin, came from that lake, and it ran really strong off that mountainside. And I would say, if it was any more vertical, that whole probably mile and a half, 2 miles vertical up, would have to be called a waterfall. But what it did was it created pools on the way down. So there's these pools that are about 8-10 feet across on the way down. And what was real interesting was a lot of times those native cutthroats, if the lake was really full and it's pouring over the top quite strong, sometimes those native cutthroats would get in that current and they'd go down that mountainside and they end up in those pools. And you could climb over to those pools off the trail, cast your line in there a couple times, and quite often you catch yourself a really nice cutthroat trout out of those pools. So I tried one of those pools and I caught myself a really nice cutthroat. It was probably about that long. It was good size. It was definitely a good full meal for me. So I strapped him to my side and kept climbing. I was going to get to the top of that mountain and to that lake and set up my camp. I was all excited. I got my first trout. I'm going to have trout dinner, get up there, catch a few trout, and just do catch and release. And I thought this trip couldn't be any better. It could be worse. I could run into a grizzly up there because they were very common in the area, and that would just make me want to turn around and head back down the mountain. Could run into a cougar that's acting territorial. I didn't want to deal with that. But I figured other than animal encounters, I don't have much to worry about. I got to the top of that mountain, and you come off that trail, and literally the last part where you come onto the top where that meadow is and where the lake is, it's real steep, and you can almost see over it, but you just can't. I get to that part, and all of a sudden I hear all these voices. And I thought, oh my gosh, there are people up here. And I could hear this laughing and giggling and stuff going on. And it sounded like a bunch of women. Well, I came up over that rise into the meadow, and you're only maybe 30 feet from the lake when you come off the top. And there's a couple of camp areas there that people have established over the years that typically a person, you get up there, you pick one and use it. But there's rarely anybody there. So I come up over the top, and I'm not even paying attention. I just look out over the lake. I'm going, yes, I'm here. I'll go way over to the north end of that lake to get away from these people. And then I looked, and here's 6 women had hiked in there. They got little dome tents set up. And they're jumping in the lake and they're running around in the meadow and they're all naked as a jaybird at my favorite trout lake. And I must have been in shock. I just stood there like, what in the world is going on? I'm way back in the wilderness. What is going on here? And then I realized off to my right, this gal comes walking up to me. She's not humble at all. She's not clothed either. And she says, "Oh, are you going to be camping up here?" And I said, "I was, but I don't think I'm going to now." And she said, "Oh, well, I can get the rest of the gals to quiet it down a little bit." I said, "Well, I don't think I can do this." And she said, "Do what?" And I said, "I don't think I can camp up here with a bunch of naked women running around." I said, "You people need to put some clothes on. You're out here in the middle of the backcountry. What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, we're just getting closer to nature." Well, that's about as close to nature as you can get. So I decided, I'm not going to ruin my trip. I hiked around their group through the meadow, and I went all the way over to the north end of that lake. And like I said, it's about 80 acres, that lake. So I'm quite a ways across that lake. I set up a camp way out on the north end of that lake where they're not making a bunch of noise and splashing in the water and scaring the trout away. And, you know, they're crazier than sin. I thought I was in the middle of Chicago. All the noise they were creating and all the carrying on. And then I thought, for crying out loud, they seem to like it up here too much. The next thing I'll know is there'll be a nudist colony on the top of the mountain. There goes the neighborhood. And after thinking about it, I thought, okay, now that's the strangest wildlife encounter I'll probably ever have. And that was a bunch. They were living the wildlife, I guarantee you. And I hope and I pray that I never have to run into that kind of situation again. I spent 2 days up there fishing and camping, feeling like I could never look across the lake. Because they stayed there. The day I left, they were still there. And the only time I seen them put clothes on was after the sun started to set, when it started getting chilly outside. I don't know who these people were. I don't know what was going through their minds. But, yeah, they were some wildlife for sure. So, there you go. Out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of the wilderness. A Sty surprise. So don't be surprised when you're out there in the wilderness, because you never know what you're going to come across. This is Sty North. Love having you watch our videos. Check our website out. Jim and Rory say hi, and we'll catch you in another one. Bye, folks.